Good morning, everyone. Happy Halloween. Beautiful weather out there. All is good. Let's get right to our agenda. Our first item is financial reports. Oh, no, first we're going to do roll call, right?
Yeah, very good. Jerry Abraham,
Here.
Phil DeFronto,
Here.
Timothy Hodges,
Here.
Catherine McKinnon,
There.
Commissioner Perez. I thank you. I see in the chat you have indicated you were here. Franklin Perry,
Here.
Chelsea Ross, and Sarah Sanders.
Here.
I do also want to let everyone know that we are live streaming and recording this meeting. Both of those have already started, and we do have a quorum for the meeting.
Perfect. Okay, financial reports, Allison Murphy.
Good morning. Before you are the September financial reports. On the revenue side, mortgage loan and investment interest revenue are coming in 21 million above budget through September and 27.6 million higher than last year. The year-over-year revenue variances continue to be driven by the increase in interest income due to the elevated interest environment. Fees and other income are 7.1 million higher than budget through September and 7.7 million higher than prior year. The large increase in single-family production that we're experiencing this year has resulted in an increase in fee income associated with the single-family program. We are also now earning administrative fees for managing the Bill for CT program on behalf of the state. On the expense side, bond interest expense is 11.9 million above budget through September and 23.2 million higher than last year. The authority's outstanding bonds as of the end of September were 581 million higher than the same time last year. Plus, we're also seeing higher interest rate costs on our variable rate bonds. Servicer fees are 8.1 million above budget through September and 6.6 million higher than prior year. The increase in single-family production continues to drive this variance. Administrative fees are coming in 5.4 million below budget and 134,000 higher than last year. When you exclude salaries and benefits for 22.2 million, the current year expenses are 287,000 lower than last year. And lastly, the change in net position is above target by 11.5 million. Are there any questions?
Well, just a comment that we're running way ahead of our budget on net position, and that's typical for CHFA, and it's good to see.
It is.
Do you know how many open positions do we have? I assume that's our little budget on administrative expenses.
Partly. What? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
As of the end of September, we actually had 129 employees and we have capacity for 148. So we have quite a few open positions.
I mean, we don't budget fully for all of the open positions because then we would be well over what we would budget year to year because, and generally there's some attrition that we are always trying to keep up with, and then creating new positions, takes a little while.
But still, of what you assumed you'd be, the positions you have filled, you're below that, and what your
Yes.
guess, what your estimate of where we'd be.
Yep. I mean, we're running a leaner shop.
Yeah.
I mean, but there's room for improvement in terms of capacity building.
Yep.
Because you always want some slack in the organization.
Right.
So that's what we're
Then
working on.
my guess is you also have some trouble hiring.
We have
Sorry.
some trouble in
Sorry.
certain positions in certain areas.
Don't we all?
We talked about that.
We talked about
Any other questions or discussion on the financial reports? Moving on to production and delinquency report, John Chilson.
Good morning. For the single family, the loan purchasing for the September, for the month, the authority purchased 366 loans totaling $100 million. For some perspective, that's 28% more in loan count and 39% more in dollar value than in September of 2023. 98% of that production was securitized at 360 loans totaling $98 million. The remaining 6 loans totaling $2 million were whole loans. The average loan size for September was $273,000. September's month-end mortgage-backed security balance was $3.25 billion, which was $82 million over August. And for the month of August, the whole loan portfolio declined by 33 loans, or roughly $5 million, ending with a portfolio balance of $1.1 billion. The delinquency rate was 5.2% for the single-family portfolio, which is 9 basis points less than the state average. The carrying balance for loans in foreclosure year over year declined by $2.7 million to $11 million, while the number of loans declined year over year by 22. For the month of September, the authority also funded 90 down payment assistance loans totaling $1 million. The average loan size $11,600, and 155 time to own loans totaling roughly $5 million with an average loan size of $31,400. On our multifamily portfolio, there were 2 loan closings in September, ending the month with 593 multifamily loans. The portfolio balance $1.4 billion. There were 7 permanent loan delinquencies, which was unchanged from the prior month, and the delinquency rate for the multifamily portfolio was less than 0.5%. Any questions?
Any questions for John? Hearing none, let's move on to the investment and swap reports.
Good morning. In the third quarter, the authority's investment portfolio had an overall increase in book value by $265 million to $4.43 billion. And the program assets increased by $199 million to $3.1 billion. Quarter over quarter, the weighted yield to maturity for the investment portfolio decreased slightly from 4.27% to 4.24%. On the swap side, there is no change from last quarter. There is a total hedging position of $878 million notional. There are currently 41 swaps with 8 counterparties. The weighted pay rates remain the same at 2.934%, and the mark-to-market value decreased from $49 million to $24 million. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So that mark-to-market value was in our favor of 49 million, correct?
Yeah,
Which is,
now it's 24 million.
okay, but still in our favor.
Yes.
Yeah, we have an inverse relationship. As interest rate goes down, the
Correct, yep. That is expected. Rates
Yeah.
can go down, might flip to where, the other way, where,
Right.
which is typical on swaps, so that's fine, but, okay.
fixed payer. Yeah, we had a fixed payer. Yes.
Any questions on this report? Okay, our next item is approval of the minutes of the Finance and Audit Committee meetings of September 26th. May I have a motion?
I'll move.
August 10.
Second.
May I have a vote, an oral vote in favor of approval of the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining?
Sarah, this is Dawn. I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I think Jerry made that motion, but I didn't catch who seconded it.
Yeah, you're right.
Tim? Thank you.
Yes.
I think the minutes are approved. Our last item today is a Wells Fargo update following from our last board meeting.
Hey, good morning, everybody. At the last Finance Committee meeting, I presented a resolution to select bond writers for the next 3 years and recommended Wells Fargo to act as one of CHFA senior managers. During the discussion, it came to light that the Office of the Controller of the Currency, or OCC, issued an enforcement action and entered into an agreement with Wells Fargo. The agreement identifies several deficiencies relating to the bank's financial crime risk management practices and anti-money laundering internal controls, and requires the bank to take comprehensive corrective actions to enhance its Bank Secrecy Act, anti-money laundering, and U.S. sanctions compliance programs. Due to the OCC enforcement action, the committee approved Wells Fargo to act as a senior manager, but with a proviso that CHFA would not utilize them as a senior manager until Wells Fargo has provided CHFA comfort regarding the recent enforcement. We have reviewed the agreement, and for this morning's meeting, invited and had two representatives from Wells Fargo, Nick Fleur and Mara Hawley, who can address or answer any questions the committee may have regarding Wells Fargo's commitment. Nick is our primary contact for bond underwriting services. Before I turn it over to Nick, I would like to inform the committee that CHFA did act against Wells Fargo after last month's meeting. Prior to the September meeting, Wells Fargo was acting as the senior manager for the 2024 Series F, a $300 million bond transaction scheduled to close on November 14. After the September meeting, we replaced Wells Fargo and asked Morgan Stanley to manage the sale. So Nick, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks very much, Hazim. Happy Halloween to everybody. And obviously, we take your concerns very, very seriously and appreciate the time to be responsive to your concerns. I know that at the last meeting, which I was there in attendance, you mentioned that you didn't want a public finance person kind of addressing these concerns. So I did want to introduce my colleague, Mara Hawley, that some of you have met before. Mara is the Executive Vice President and Division Manager for our Government and Institutional Banking Division, a very senior leader at the firm. And some of you may recall did address the board a number of years back. So without further ado, Mara, do you want to take it away?
Thanks, Nick. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And I apologize. You may see me looking up and down, but for some reason I can't get my Zoom meeting off my small screen onto my big screen. So it's kind of making me dizzy. But I want to echo Nick's appreciation and thanks for your giving us time to speak with you today. I'm going to make a few brief remarks and then happy to answer the questions that you have that I have the ability and authority to answer. So as you all know, in the middle of September, Wells Fargo and the OCC did enter into an agreement related to our anti-money laundering and sanctions risk management practices. And Hazim stated the expectations under that agreement. And I just want to make certain that I share with you the statement from Wells Fargo that was a part of that joint agreement that was issued by the OCC, because I think it sets the tone for the collaborative approach between our company and our regulators with regard to resolving this and other outstanding enforcement actions. We have been working to address a substantial portion of what's required in the formal agreement. And we are committed to completing the work with the same sense of urgency as we have shown with our other regulatory commitments. I think that's really important because the statement is an acknowledgement by our regulator that our company was already working to address this issue before the agreement was reached. To put that into greater context, I think it's important to look back a little bit and reflect on the larger journey that Wells Fargo has been on. I know that Hazim and Commissioner Perez and several others of you, Ms. Sanders, I think you as well, may remember me, as Nick said, from, golly, 5 or more years ago, when we talked about Wells Fargo's reputation and regulatory issues. At that point, we were then beginning on this journey. And in the last 5 years, we've made incredible progress under our current CEO, Charlie Scharf, who joined us after an illustrious career at JP Morgan and Bank of New York and with Visa. He is singularly focused on addressing the gaps in our risk and control environment. He says at every quarter, at every meeting, in every written report, in every presentation to Congress, in every meeting with a public official, that closing gaps in our risk and control environment is our #1 top priority. Our objective is to build a risk and control infrastructure that's appropriate for a bank of our size and complexity, making our operational and risk compliance management as robust as our credit and other financial risk management has historically been. To get this work done, we've developed plans and have been executing them now for more than 5 years, but with great urgency with Charlie under 5 years. We're completing these plans, and I think this is really important, with increasing confidence. Charlie has used that language in his public statements, and the tenor of that language and the tone of increasing confidence, I think, is reflective of the work that's been done over years and the support that we are seeing, or the acknowledgement, I should say, that we're getting from our regulators as they review our work. You all hopefully don't recall this, because I'm certain you have far better things to do than follow our regulatory progress. But earlier this year, February or March, the OCC satisfied or completed or dropped, resolved, I'm not exactly certain what the official language is, but they indicated that Wells Fargo had fully satisfied the terms of the originating consent order around the sales practices that, quite frankly, led to the discovery and developments around the risk and control infrastructure gaps. We have not only just completed that, but we have completed, and the OCC has dropped 6 significant consent orders in total. And that tells me that we are getting the job done. We are an enormous organization. We've worked hard not only to address the risk and control framework in partnership, well, to satisfy our regulators. I wouldn't say, they probably wouldn't want us to use the word partners, but we absolutely are collaborating. We're taking their guidance. We are doing the work. We are instituting the policies and procedures. The OCC reviews and validates our work, and they make their determinations. As we've completed our deliverables, our control environment has become stronger. It's a continuous, ongoing effort, and we're tracking effectiveness along the way. We use numerous internal metrics to show that the work is improving our control environment, and we won't be satisfied until the work is complete. We have added approximately 10,000 people across risk and control related groups and spent more than $2.5 billion just in fiscal 2023 than we did in 2018 in these areas. So the point of that reference is we have invested more people, and we're investing more financially to harden, to strengthen that risk and control environment. And that is billions of dollars each year in people, technology, infrastructure, policies, procedures, and oversight. and we are making tremendous progress. We are not done. We are very focused on the work, but we are moving ahead, as I said earlier, with increasing confidence. The regulatory pressure on banks, not just Wells Fargo, but on the entire industry, is appropriately high. The work that we do and the safety of our customers' deposits, the importance of our compliance with laws that are designed to protect the integrity of the banking system, as well as the safety and security of our country, it's essential, and we take it incredibly seriously. But I just want to close with an important point. One of the indicators of the quality of our work and the commitment with which we're pursuing it is what we are doing to sweep every corner clean ourselves. That we track by the identification of issues within the company. Meaning, I find an issue, I raise my hand, I ask for help to remediate it. That is probably the biggest cultural change and is a great harbinger of our progress, because the issues that we are identifying versus the issues that our regulators identify when they come in and do, you know, their normal regulatory work, that dynamic is now flipped on its head. Meaning, 5 years ago, the OCC was telling us what was wrong with our company. Today, the bank is saying to the OCC, hey, we found this gap. Here's what we're doing to fix it. Follow along with us on this, but we are in control of our risk and control framework, and we're committed to making it better. And as a 42, not years old, but 42-year veteran of our company, I can tell you with confidence that as a leader in our company, this is what I think about, what I work on every day. What can I be doing to make our risk and control framework stronger? And I personally am very satisfied with and excited about the progress that we've made, the changes to our culture, and the path that we're on. So with that, I'll close my formal remarks and be happy to address any questions to the best that I can.
I would just like to say I appreciate your remarks about the progress you've made on prior actions. I hadn't always heard, we don't always hear when things are resolved. And I also am happy to hear about your internal focus on trying to identify things early on. That's, I think, what ultimately your regulators want to see. But on this latest action, are there certain milestones that you have with the regulators that you have to meet going forward? How does that work in terms of what they expect from you going forward? I'm just curious.
Sure, and yes, there are milestones, and they are, for the most part, outlined in the formal agreement itself. And so I can't comment more specifically than what's required in the formal agreement, because that to do so would be to be disclosing confidential supervisory information, which I, as a bank employee, am prohibited by our regulators from doing. So I just want to put that caveat out there. But when you're looking at the agreement, you can note that one of the first elements is that within 120 days of the initial signing of the agreement, so that was about September 12th, I believe. So within 120 days, shortly after the first of the year, we are accountable for providing back to the OCC the outline of the plan. And as again, I read that quote from Charlie about the fact that our work is well underway. The fact that the OCC consented to have that statement in the shared release, I think is a real positive statement of the OCC's awareness of our readiness, our commitment, and our effort to really accelerate that timeline to the best of our ability.
And if you were to miss one of those milestones, what would happen? Would we hear about that? If you were to miss a milestone, would the OCC report that, I assume?
You know, I have to tell you, I don't have that level of detail, but I would, like anything else, I think it depends on the why. I mean, and this is just Mara's common sense answer, to be clear. You know, technology can be a critical part of any infrastructure or enterprise-wide policy these days. In fact, it really has to be in the environment in which we work. And that might be one scenario where there could be a small delay, but you know, we're making such progress in working so well in concert with our regulators. I think they would make the right decision based on the facts.
Any questions from any other board members? Commissioner Perez has a chat. I want to thank Mara for meeting with me and other members of my staff, and I appreciate the efforts that Wells Fargo is doing to address the latest consent order. However, I do want it to be, not to be lost, that at the end of the day, they did violate the federal law in the area of the Bank Secrecy Act and AML area. And again, I apologize for not being able to speak.
Well,
Yeah.
and if I could just make one comment, you know, and this is another, you know, just personal observation. We're in a rapidly changing economic and technology environment, particularly technology environment. And with those changes, the way we operate as banks and the way our regulators seek to protect the financial system and support the bank's regulatory and execution regimes must also change. The regulatory tools and, quite frankly, the threats to the banking system are very different today than they were 5 years ago, much less 10 years ago. Some would argue that with the advent of AI, the threats today are different than they were 6 months ago. So if you put that in context, absolutely, the OCC is expecting and requiring improvements from Wells Fargo in our BSA AML framework. But I want to emphasize that the OCC did not assess a fine and did not assess a penalty. And since the OCC took its action against us, there have been announcements by other banks with regard to actions, discussions, fines in some cases, and others pending regulatory actions potentially, as noted in recent public disclosures. And it is possible, probable, I would say, that each of these should be viewed in a greater context of the rapid changes in the external environment that require changes. And I just want to say, at the end of the day, the banking industry works in concert with our regulatory partners. And I'm going to use that word there. We are not adversaries, right? This is not a zero-sum game. So I think when you look at regulatory actions, you've got to broaden the thinking to say, well, it's more than the press release. It's what's the nature? Are they saying the bank did something wrong? Are they saying the bank broke the law? Are they issuing cease and desist, or are they issuing fines or penalties? But at the end of the day, we've got to feel confident as a country that our regulatory regime and our financial institutions are keeping pace with and preparing for and protecting us against ever-changing threats. And so in that context, I think you have to look at this a little bit differently than perhaps in the past, particularly with regard to the BSA AML, because if you think about that, so much of what that also encompasses is fraudulent activity, activities against banks. Yes, there's suspicious activity, there are national security issues, but there are also just sort of baseline safety and soundness of the banking system issues. And we don't want to get so myopic that we think that anytime there's an announcement that the bank is a bad bank, because if that's the attitude we take, I don't know, that could be a pretty big club, and it could be a pretty big club for reasons that when you look at them in context are designed around strengthening the company, the system, not necessarily around punishment for bad deeds.
Phil, did you have a comment or a question?
No, I think she raised a very good point with all of our other vendors. I mean, well, first of all, I want to say I appreciate Commissioner Perez bringing that up, because it is, as someone who's regulated, it's very important to have to hold people accountable for it. And in our industry, if you try to do things the right way, it's just important for people who are trying to do things the right way to make sure that there's answers to questions and people are held accountable. So I really do appreciate that. However, one of the point that I make is, I mean, there was a recent huge fine against BSA AML, I believe, by OCC fine TD Bank North. And I guess my question is, are we confident that we're looking not solely just at Wells Fargo, but does all of our vendors that we're working with, if we're holding Wells Fargo accountable, do we have to do the same with all the other vendors?
Yes.
Somebody said yes. So do we?
I think the answer is yes.
Do we do work with TD Bank?
Yes, we do.
And did we do the same thing with them that we're doing with Wells Fargo?
We haven't done any business with them recently, but they generally, when we engage them, they act more as a creditor or any.
Okay. But aren't we required, just like to, regardless of the vendor management requirements required, like I'm required to do that, aren't we required to have that same due diligence with even if it's just a creditor? Because isn't that the concept behind BSA AML? I mean, that's a discussion offline we can have, but I'm just saying, like, if we're going to do it for Wells Fargo, and I'm all for it. Trust me, I follow the rules in a lot of ways. I mean, and trying to keep up on the regulations. We're under BSA AML also, and every person in our office gets educated on it, and we report. And it's difficult. There's difficulty to keep up on that. I mean, for a company with a couple hundred employees, I can't even imagine what it's like for Wells Fargo. But that being said, I just want to make sure we're being fair. Like if we're doing this as a policy now, we have to do it as a vendor management policy on all of our vendors, not just one.
And I think that's part of the reason why we are having the discussion, because previously tracking AML it's not something that we were focusing on. I have to admit that because the way that we've been approaching it has always been based on what we get directly from MSRB or from the SEC or anything in relation to public finance per se. So this is a bit deeper, and it goes towards the parent, and on top of that, the parent is the financial institutions, because in the past, when we talk about bond underwriters, many of them, they are not financial institutions, broker dealers. So I welcome any feedback from the committee to determine if we would like to establish some policies. I'm all ears. And keep in mind that we are only, we started this conversation about bond underwriters, but like Phil mentioned, we do engage some of the entities elsewhere, either on the loan origination side, the servicing side, so on and so forth. So, where do you draw the line, and how do you determine what's what?
I mean, I personally think that we should have the same standards that a banking entity should have as far as vendor management goes, because we're a quasi-public agency. I don't know how anybody else feels about that, but it scares me slightly if we're not doing that, and the risk of criticism if something happens. So I mean, I guess once again, that's probably a bigger topic that we're going to probably have to deal with at a different time. But and like I said, I think Commissioner Perez raising it's so valid, because who we work with is important. So.
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Perez, I'll read his comment. My recommendation is that we should look at establishing some form of policy. I also remind staff that all of our contracts, at least the ones approved by the AG's office, have a clause that requires our vendors to comply with federal and state law. Okay, so we'll probably be continuing this discussion. Anything else to discuss here today? Any other questions for Wells Fargo? Well, I'd like to thank Mara for making time for us today and giving us a briefing. It was very helpful. I will say our office just had a briefing on cryptocurrency and blockchain, and I left that meeting realizing that the world it's not just a niche thing, it's a new world, and our securities are going to be trading in blockchain, I believe. And it's going to create new risks. And a lot of the regulatory processes haven't even caught up with it yet here in the United States. Apparently, Europe is far ahead of us. So there's a new world heading at us with regard to a new innovation in the world having to do with securities and cash and so forth, and currencies that I don't think we're really prepared for, but it will be create additional challenges for our banking institutions and for us. Any other comments or questions? That I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
All in favor?
And-
Say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Everyone.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you.